Now, one of the big questions I get is, because most people know in my story, when I was a type A corporate banker, I had no access to my intuitive gifts whatsoever, right? This is a midlife emergence for me, is learning to use my intuitive gifts. And my spirit guides told me the reason that happened, the reason I went for 35, 36 years without having any access to my intuitive gifts was exactly for this purpose, rule number 4. So I could teach you how to learn your language, how you specifically can learn to talk to the other side of the veil, because every single one of you listening right now, you have the ability to receive information from the other side of the veil. Your spirit guides, your angels, your loved ones, God, source, universe, talking to you every single day. The challenge is, and here is what you get to release, is that most people think it's supposed to look a certain way. And this is really what gets in the way. Just like if you went to a foreign country and they were communicating, you wouldn't use your language of origin to communicate, right? You would use the language of that country, or you would need to learn that language. Well, the divine, the other side of the veil, has a very specific way of speaking to you, and you need to understand that language. Now, you don't have to learn it. It's already within you, but you do need to understand it's specific and unique to you, that the makeup of your language looks different than any other person, right? And it's because of the way your mind is structured. Now, and by that I mean your brain. Now, your brain is structured for you to reach your highest version of your life, right? The way your mind works differently than my mind and the person sitting next to you. This is true. Our mind is different depending on what we came here to achieve, right? I have one child who is not neurotypical, one that is. Both of them have the perfect brains for their life purposes, right? But the way the divine's going to speak to the neurotypical child is going to be very different than the not neurotypical child. And neurotypical is only one example, and by that I mean, ADHD and all the other non-neurotypical brain makeups. You may be heavily visual, heavily audio. You might have a heavier sense of feeling things, right? So I want to talk you through the ways, the components of the language, how they can come through, and how it might look for you. But I will tell you that these are inextricably linked with the first 3 rules. What I mean by that is, if you are resistant to what's happening in the outer world, the friction of keeping it out and being in this constant battle with it is going to create so much static that you will not be able to hear your team speaking to you, because that language is very subtle. Same with, if you're not in a receptive relationship with yourself, you are not going to be able to feel the information as it comes to you, because our body is actually the antenna of that intuitive information. And we are shoving different parts of ourselves away, and the voices that those parts have, because when we're resisting pieces of ourselves, they're also quietly whispering to be let out of the jail that we put them in. Well, when we're blocking out that sound, we're going to block out that same subtle communication from the other side of the veil. And certainly if we have an environment that's not conducive to receptivity, we're not going to be able to hear as clearly. Now, that does change over time. As you work with these rules and you build on them, you don't have to become perfect at them. I'm not perfect at them. Every time we run the receiving school, I am learning and growing with the process with everyone else. But what we find is that as you start to do these, your intuition will grow. And your intuition, just that general gut sense and your trust in following it, is the foundation of your language. That is the foundation of your language. There's many external components that the universe, that the divine, that our loved ones, angels use. And those are things like signs. So signs are a big one. Using tools like oracle cards is another. And then using other humans to deliver message through, someone that says something to you out of the blue, and it sort of just responds to a question you were holding in your heart, or you're thinking of your grandmother who's crossed over, and you're wondering if she's, connected to you. And one of the things you used to do together was bake cookies together. And as you're watching TV, the next thing that comes on is a commercial for cookies, and there's two people there baking them together, right? So they use all of these different external opportunities to communicate with us, right? So they have lots of different options of ways to send us messages. And then our internal receptivity happens in a number of different ways. And most people assume that hearing from the other side of the veil is going to look like one of two gifts: clairvoyance or clairaudience. It means you're going to see, right? You're going to see them in front of you, or you're going to see clearly the future, or you're going to hear their voice in your mind, right? Now, those two gifts exist, but they are not the most common gifts on the planet. The most common gifts on the planet are actually claircognizance and clairsentience. And I'm going to talk about what those are. Claircognizance is the knowing. It's when you've asked a question sort of to the other side of the veil, and then all of a sudden the answer is in your head and it's there. Clairsentience is actually feeling an answer, right? It's actually feeling the answer rather than having it heard or seen. It's actually feeling. And if you have drank in what I've shared with you so far, you know we've been talked out of our feelings, right? Which is why we as people attach so much to the gifts of clairvoyance and clairaudience as being the real ones, because hearing things and seeing things is affirmed in our society, whereas feeling things and knowing things, that is not affirmed for you as a child, right? If you say, I saw a bird, and someone can look up and see a bird, they're like, oh, look, there you go. If you as a child said, I know there is a bird coming, the likelihood that you would be received in the same way is very limited, right? And so from a small age, we are talked out of some of the ways we receive information, and others are really affirmed. And those ways that we receive through clairvoyance and clairaudience are very uncommon. So it's likely right now you're receiving information, but you're expecting it to look one way and it actually looks another way. And for every person, the nuance of how that comes together is different. So how do you start working with this? The first is to really trust what comes. And one of the ways I see people talk themselves out of their language all the time is to say, oh, I think it's wishful thinking. Like, it's wishful thinking that I thought about my grandmother and then that commercial came on. It's wishful thinking that I thought, should I take the next step forward? And I felt strongly a yes. But it's because I wanted it to be a yes, right? So we talk ourselves out of it. So it's first is just trusting what comes. And certainly a wonderful baby step that I think is easier for a lot of people are signs. And signs are easier for people because they're external and we can actually see them. And what I will tell you as you start to work with your language is one of the things that may get in the way of you trusting it is when you start to realize the abundance with which you receive communication. You are receiving communication literally every minute of every day. Now, you don't have to pay attention to all of it, but it's there. So you might actually get 10, 15, 20 signs in a day. And then your mind starts to doubt because we doubt abundance in all its forms. Isn't that crazy? Because we've been talked out of it. Trusting all that comes is really going to be helpful as you move through this process. And I'm going to pull up Jess and tell you a little bit about Jess's story, because I think you'll probably recognize yourself if you don't have a fluid communication with the other side of the veil. Jess said, I think it's that I'm more aware and open to accepting the feelings I get. Instead of chalking it up to being a good guesser or that I'm lucky, I'm acknowledging that I'm intuitive. I'm also more aware of the signs I see, because when Jess came into receiving school, that was a big desire for her. And she felt she had no access to the other side of the veil. She missed her mother terribly, and she wanted to feel connected to her. And here was another post. She had said, oh my goodness, I keep getting the message to, I don't even remember what the message was that she was, action. She kept getting the action card, right? Oh, this is perfect actually for most of you, because you're thinking, oh, if it tells me to take action, then I should be doing something. And she pulled her cards, and all the messages came were to relax, to allow, to go to your inner wisdom, right? And so the action steps she needed to take to get what she wanted done was to relax and to take some time off and to trust her intuition, which is the messages she had been getting throughout when she was working with the previous 3 rules. And yet she was still having a hard time believing that she was supposed to relax. She had a lot of the messaging I see in here, which is, can I really slow down? Can I be lazy when I have so much to do? The messages were coming and coming, and being able to see it rather than just feeling it, that she was able to see it in the cards. That was the added sort of support that she needed to feel safe doing it. All right. And then finally, once you're at this stage now, you're flowing with what's going on around you. You're flowing with what's going on inside you. You're giving your space an opportunity to be a space of receptivity, and you're communicating with the other side of the veil. Then, and only then, can you think about what it is for you to do next. And that's where the 100% rule comes in.